Just log on YouTube, to give your brain some new food.
Caste, No Racism in Jamaica. By Ian T. Sebàs. Out of many, one people, is the motto of Jamaica, and one of the most unique and beautifully written slogans ever made to represent a country. In essence, it is a boastful recognition of mixed ethnicities compounded as a single nationality, humane and poetic. But it is important to highlight that the term mixed ethnicity, in reference to Jamaica, has always been magnified in literature, creating an oversight of its true ratio. Jamaica's population has always been more than 92% black, with the majority being descendants of Africa, and the estimated published number of Jamaicans often accounts only for those on the island, and not of those living in other countries. An account of all Jamaicans in the world would result in a staggering sum, especially those of Afro descent, who are accounted for the highest number of Jamaicans who migrate. The ambition to migrate is higher among black Jamaicans because of economical struggles faced by most, but not by all Jamaicans. And if you look closely on Jamaica, you will notice that the most economically successful Jamaicans, living in Jamaica, have one thing in common: they are less melanated. The number of white Jamaicans does not amount to 1% of the population, but they do exist, and starting with them at the top, looking closely, you will notice a color chart, in a descending order that puts darker-skinned Jamaicans at the bottom of the success and comfort chain. This is not racism, never was and never will be. This is a system of caste, which was implemented a long time ago before most of us were born. Caste, defined in sociology as being an endogamous and hereditary social group limited to persons of the same rank, occupation, economic position, and having mores distinguishing it from other such groups, any rigid system of social distinctions. In other words, race plays no part. Caste is a prejudice without ethnic bounds. Racism, as ugly as it is, has its discipline. It activates only on the ground of not belonging to the same race. Caste is of a more perplexed notion, birth with a competitive spirit, stroked by ego, harboring a superiority complex, classism and scorn. But like all prejudices, caste needed a distinction of identity for classism. In the 1940s Nazi Germany, where everyone were white, Jewish names, features, and bloodline were the only identifying marks for being a victim of caste. In India then, and now, where caste is still prevalent, victims of the system are easier to identify, simply by the shade of one's skin. Lighter skin Indians at the top and darker skin at the bottom. Dalits, outcasts, untouchables, broken. The true reasons for the caste system are endlessly listed and includes fear, jealousy, and the non-acceptance of nature's order. By the time we were born, most of history's truth were deliberately distorted and erased, forcing us to see the color chart as a natural way of life and societies. Jamaica was established by white people, and black people were mere occupants, owners of nothing. That is the way it has been, and the way it transcended for a very long time. For most of its modern years, Jamaica continued to be ruled by the United Kingdom, a white nation. Its two most prevalent political parties have been led by white men for most of its modern history, a transparent and emphasized system of undetected caste, which bound the nation for many decades, with its occupants not realizing that despite which local party ruled as government, the psychological acceptance of caste was without option. It has been said in recent time that slavery was a choice. That is debatable. But the caste system that held Jamaicans in mental shackles for decades, was, and is definitely a choice. Ignorance of the law is no excuse, is probably one of life's best rule and discipline. Despite Jamaicans not realizing that they have been brainwashed to accept a caste system, does not change the fact that black people being the majority could overturn this concept of belief at any given time. Instead, it was accepted and nurtured to believe that they are worth less for having darker complexions, unqualified for being top of the comfort chain and unqualified to be heard. A baseless concept, persistently driven and psychologically controlled generational beliefs as being true. Its resultant effects are so powerful that it created self-hate among black people and others of darker complexions, to the point of many adapting methods of skin bleaching, solely to resemble those deemed to be better human beings, or successful. The caste system was inspired by slavery, and not by racism. Slavery was spawned from economical greed and the necessity of a strong workforce. The Negro race was acknowledged as being the strongest, physically, among all human beings, with the ability to endure all weathers and still get the job done, something that the white race was unable to do by themselves. They needed the best workforce and the cheapest labor cost. This greed gave birth to slavery. But unlike machines, this workforce reproduced itself and created a bigger workforce, and being blinded by greed, the whites failed to realize that a reproduction of their workforce was gradually creating a population of black people. By the time this was fully realized, the number of black people were too much. They fought and forced their former masters and opponents to share the society, which they once worked as slaves. After slavery was abolished, white people refused to see Negroes as equal to them, understandingly so. Considering that for hundreds of years, a black person meant slave, almost non-human, closer to being in the category of dogs. Therefore, the economy which represents the financial powerhouse of any modern society would not be shared equally with anyone who resembles the color of former slaves. Black people were no longer seen as slaves, but neither were they to be seen as equal to whites. And the whites who controlled the economy, controlled the creation of class and the distribution of money, a reason why until this day, white people are seen as rich and educated, and blacks are seen as poor and unintelligent. It is a false narrative, but true or false, the reality that controls one's belief, is the reality that rules. Blacks are hated and envied for the very same reasons which they were deemed valuable and necessary, their strength of endurance. Jews were hated and envied for the very same reasons they were praised, their geniuses. The Dalits of India are scorned and belittled for their resemblance of Negroes, a feared truth of them being physically stronger. As juvenile as it may sound, these classisms bear some strife caused by jealousy, and false narratives were deemed necessary as means to discredit truths. Despite being of white appearance, Jews were deemed as being bad, by fellow white people, and should be eliminated from the earth. Dalits are Indians who are victimized by other Indians for being more melanated. An entire nation of more than 1 billion people are brainwashed to believe that the color of one's skin makes them better or worse than others of their own kind. Black people in Africa and other parts of the world, including South America and the Caribbean, accept themselves as being less than their counterparts, measured by the shades of complexion, merely because they were brainwashed to believe that this is true. A truth that stands firm in Jamaica until today, where lighter-skinned Jamaicans are deemed as being more beautiful, and darker-skinned Jamaicans are seen as less attractive. And it does not stop there, because in Jamaica, being of lighter complexion offers more access to economical opportunities and acceptance to the upper class. However, things are changing, including the strength of the caste system. The new generation are more independent thinkers. Rebels, so to speak, who are not easily controlled by notions of old. This is a threat to the caste system. Individual characteristics of Negroes are being proudly owned and embraced as unique, beautiful, and belonging. This promises some light at the end of a dark tunnel, that will someday shine full. But for now the caste system and its influence still has a grip on the Jamaican society, and the mindset of its citizens.